Hello and welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Robert Dinerstein, chairman of Everybody Wins. It's a good name, Bob. Everybody Wins. Sounds good to me. But you have had a very, you have a stellar resume in many areas of the world, financial, legal, etc. Mm-hmm. I happen to be friendly with somebody that's at Greenberg Trog, so that caught my eye. First off, is this pro bono for you?
It is pro bono.
Okay, so what made you decide to do this?
I'm a graduate of the New York City Public Schools, and I'm going to be going to my 50th high school reunion in just a couple of weeks.
Really?
And
what happened? Did you graduate before you were born?
Seems like just yesterday.
Right.
Of course, the Dodgers were still here in Brooklyn at the time.
So were a lot of things different.
Indeed. I went to Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, which at the time was not only one of the best public high schools in the city, but one of the best public high schools in the country. Right. Today it's a failed school. Right. And that experience really made me realize how important public education is and how important it was for the city, among other cities, to address the problems facing the school systems.
Okay. And just for a little background, Everybody Wins is a mentoring organization dedicated to eradicating literacy. Illiteracy. Right. Oh my gosh, what a thing that was.
The school system has done a good enough job of eradicating illiteracy.
Right.
So maybe that
was a good line for you. Right. Oh wow. Just shows you a slip of the tongue. Anyway, you're right. So I read about you from a letter that you wrote to the New York Times editorial a couple of weeks ago. And to get going, I want to quote something that you wrote. Mm-hmm. You responded to a article that a former chancellor of the New York City school system had written. And you say that everything was said except improving youngest students' reading skills. And you say that's a way of instilling self-confidence and interest in learning. And you go on to say, which caught my eyes, as this show is called Getting Your Money's Worth, that all this can be done without major financing. I want to ask you something, Bob. You've been around for a while, and you've played in the big league for many years. In a couple of days, we're going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Apollo, putting the man on the moon. How is it that a country this smart can't figure its way out of the education debacle?
I think the problem facing public education is the same one that faces efforts of government to deal with any large problem. There is a reluctance to admit past errors, and instead of eliminating the failed programs and starting anew, they tend to layer new programs on top of the failed ones. That is expensive, it's dilutive of the effort, and it tends to make it much more difficult to really achieve anything.
And as a matter of fact, our Secretary of Education, who I heard speak recently, he's just got he's got a big pot of money to give away.
And that's the other thing. The country tends to take the view, if you throw billions at it, you must be doing something right. There's an old saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And there's an element of that, I think, in the way in which we approach education. And it was the basis for my implied criticism of Harold Levy's op-ed piece. He gave 5 ideas for improving education, unrelated to one another, somewhat disjointed, dealt with different levels of education, different aspects of the problem. And I think that crazy quilt approach has been reflected in much of our efforts to improve education.
Before we go into Everybody Wins, and I want to be sure that we save enough time for you for that. You were in the business world for many years. would you ever have tolerated, do you know any industry on planet Earth that tolerates with a lack of accountability, no relationship between how much money is spent and the product that comes from it? I can't think of one.
You're right, in theory. Of course, I came out of the financial services industry, and one could say that they got it wrong as well.
They got it wrong, certainly of late.
We'll have to deal with that.
But you weren't there then, so we can't blame you for that.
Happily, I was not. It's true. There is no accountability, and the conventional wisdom is if we just spent more money, if we gave teachers higher salaries, if you give a bad teacher more money, you still have a bad teacher.
You just have a better
paid bad teacher. So until we get accountability at the teaching level, and until we get our priorities right, we're spending a lot of money on programs that are not at the heart of teaching kids to improve. There's a lot of effort on bilingual education, on special needs, on this or that, all of which may seem good, but it is terribly dilutive of the resources available and of the real effort to give kids a foundation.
And sort of a shotgun approach.
Totally. And, there are consequences to your decisions. And in this case, they're not unexpected consequences.
And they certainly are not very good for the quality of life in this country.
Not at all.
So let's go to Everybody Wins. Your organization is kind of a one-on-one.
It is. And, we start with the premise based on a lot of empirical data that the Department of Education and authors in the education field have noticed, that children who are read to aloud by a parent, by any other caregiver, tend to develop an interest in reading and a facility in reading much better than kids who don't.
Right.
And that ability to read is a foundation, it's a building block of education. Nick Kristof in the New York Times just a couple of weeks ago had a very interesting article in which he pointed out that during summer recess, children who do not read actually fall behind in their reading ability in just that 2-month period.
They come back at a lesser level,
than when they left.
Right.
So if that's true over 2 months, think of what it is during the 12 years of primary education if you were not given that grounding, that encouragement to read.
Okay, so that's the premise upon which your organization is built. Now, how do you go about implementing a strategy to combat that?
Right. The one-on-one aspect is very important. Many of the kids we serve...
One volunteer?
It's one volunteer, 1 day a week with one child, and very often staying with the same child through several grades of development. And the reason is that many of these kids come from working class homes, one-parent homes, and several siblings. And it may be a home filled with love, but it is not filled with excess time.
And may not be filled with books either.
And may not be filled with books. And having an adult who is non-judgmental, who is there just to be supportive and to encourage the child to read, to expand their imagination and the wonderment that children have if given the opportunity, we found it to be really transformational. One quick anecdote, because it really tells a very nice story. We had an event to introduce Everybody Wins to potential supporters. And we had the principal of one of the schools at one of our newer programs speak. And she told the story of this young boy who entered first grade barely being able to read, not even knowing how to open a book, let alone read one, and very timid and afraid to interact. The boy was paired with a volunteer in the Everybody Wins Power Lunch program, and by the end of that school year, he was reading above his grade level, had totally opened up, and was enjoying learning and going to school.
Okay, let's take the anecdote. For one thing, you said paired with a volunteer. Where do you get your volunteers?
The original model for the program was very simple. The Arthur Tannenbaum, who started this program in 1991, went to corporations, primarily in Manhattan, but in some of the other boroughs as well, and asked them to provide volunteers from amongst their staff to go to schools near their offices at lunch hour to read.
That's the power lunch concept.
Power lunch concept, and to help defray the cost of the program by making contributions to the organization.
So is that concept still alive and well?
It is still the cornerstone of the program, but we are now moving beyond it because we want to move to other boroughs in the city and to other neighborhoods that need the program. And you can't do that with that model because you don't have the corporations there.
So you could, but you have, I see, a power breakfast, or you have an after school.
We have different sources.
And you have different sources
of volunteers.
Does the person that's a volunteer, because we don't have a lot of time, I want to move on. Does the person that's a volunteer have to be someone associated with education?
No.
Just someone who knows how to read.
Absolutely. And we provide training.
Right. Yeah. So I want to ask you, do you ever get from folks, I mean, I get it sometimes, you're not an educator. How do you know what you're talking about? Do you ever get that from, like, how do you know it's good for kids to read aloud?
Yes, we get that in the following way. You may go to a foundation and say, we'd love you to support our program. And they say, okay, how can you prove that your program really benefits children? Show us the metrics by which you, well, ask the teachers who see the difference in the child's performance. Ask the parents, ask the volunteers, ask the children.
Yeah, and in any way, it's kind of like a chicken soup question. It may not cure, but it's certainly not going to hurt.
No, it's not going to hurt, and it does, in fact,
I'm
help.
sure it does.
It really helps.
Yeah, but kids that so then this love of books, is there a method then that kind of love of books extends to books in the child's life, in the child's home? I think you've done a little bit of that.
Yes, for sure. Nick Kristof in that same article identified 10 children's books that he thought were particularly
and I think you have
valuable.
also on your website. I saw some children's books.
We try to identify worthwhile books, but it's also bringing out from the child their interests and then helping them. And the mentoring aspect is to encourage them if they need some ideas.
How many kids in this program? This is national, right?
It's national. In the city, we have about 1,500 volunteers and about the same number of children.
Right. Okay. Well, I know some folks I'm going to recommend to volunteer for you.
Terrific.
I think it's a terrific idea, and honestly, because the show is getting your money's worth, it's refreshing to hear somebody come in and talk about improving kids' education and not have a lot of zeros attached to the concept.
Yeah, nothing comes for free, but this is a program that is not expensive to run and is scalable and can be brought to more and more children.
Honestly, for folks who, and especially now for folks who've lost jobs, for folks that are from your own industry,
indeed.
What a better way to use your time well and give back to society.
Absolutely, and to help build the next generation.
Right. Thanks so much, Bob, for being on the show. I love the idea of everybody wins, and I hope that there's more of this comes from this from your being my guest.
Thank you so much.
I'm Judith West. You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. Thanks for watching.